Today I finished my workday as a doctor in the Northwest Territories, but tomorrow I'm in Florida to bring a patient back to Canada. But let's start this trip from the beginning. After a lovely 10 hours at home, it's time to head to the airport. I made it to the airport and got past airport security despite getting the dreaded Quad S that I had heard about. That meant that security involved metal detector, body scanner, pat down, every electronic, no matter size, being taken out of its case and swabbed, and a few other things, basically everything, but made it through. And now is a good time to talk about what even is this commercial medical repatriation industry all about. And really, it's about getting people back home, usually after they've gotten sick while traveling. The majority of the work is funded by the insurance companies from travel insurance, and most patients are well enough that they can sit in a business class seat accompanied by either a nurse most of the time or a doctor some of the time. Occasionally there's cases that are private paid by patients and families where they didn't have insurance, and sometimes, like in the Hong Kong to Toronto video, it's actually patients who are so unwell that they have to be on a stretcher at the back of the plane. Thankfully, today is a more straightforward seated patient. We have about an hour until boarding, so I'm going to sit down and enjoy a nice breakfast and get a pre-flight walk-in. And hopefully, I'll have a nice, relaxing, and restful 5-hour flight to Tampa. I have made it to Tampa, assessed the patient who thankfully is fit to fly, got checked into the hotel here, which is actually more like an old school Airbnb in a century home, kind of cool. But the sun is setting, it's time to get out for a walk, see some palm trees, find dinner. I walked down to a restaurant that was a very Florida bar by the beach and quickly learned that St. Patrick's Day is celebrated a day early when it is a Saturday night, and there was an hour-long wait for food. But eventually I got dinner and then went for an evening walk by the water, taking a break to share a bit more about what it's like to do this kind of work. The stretcher cases take weeks to plan, so you get some more notice for those, but that's a small minority of the work that I do. For these seated patients, it's usually just about 24 to 36 hours notice, and then I find myself somewhere here, like Florida, when I had no idea I would be here 2 days ago. So when you get the case assigned, it's already been reviewed by usually a discharging doctor, the medical director for the air medical company, and often the airline medical staff as well. But you still go through the medical records, make sure you don't see any red flags, phone the patient, make sure that they actually line up with what's going on according to the medical records, and you make a plan so that as soon as you arrive, the first thing you do is come assess the patient, make sure that they're fit to fly, and as long as there's no surprises, you then have a bit of free time. Here in Florida on this trip, it's about 10 hours. In Europe or Asia, it's probably more like 20 hours. But you have a little bit of time on your own to explore, but still needing to get back to the hotel at a reasonable hour so you can be rested for the long journey with the patient. So let's enjoy a little bit more of an evening stroll, and then it's going to be time for bed. I should add that a lot of the job, once you're actually traveling with the patient, is really about the logistics and trying to make it the smoothest flight that they will ever take. So that means ground transportation, which is set up by the company, wheelchair service at the airport, making sure that we talk to the service director or lead flight attendant to make it a smooth boarding process. And then at the destination airport, similarly having ground transportation that's been arranged by the company, but having communicated with the driver so we can get the patient right out to that and back home or to the hospital, depending on where they're going. It is 4:45 a.m. and I'm getting packed to head out. Great time to talk about the worst part of the job. Well, other than the unpredictability, both for trips coming in very last minute, even less so than 24 hours notice sometimes, and trips canceling with the same unpredictability. The other thing is constant jet lag or sleep deprivation. We picked up the patient and made our way to the airport. Today we had 2 flights with a connection in Washington, D.C., where we got to ride on these very strange interterminal transport vehicles that you find only really here and in Montreal, before getting our second flight to Toronto. The flights were medically uneventful, but upon arrival in Toronto, I was held up at the border due to all of the medications that I was carrying, but eventually I was allowed back into the country. On the land journey back to the patient's hometown, some symptoms developed for the patient, so we changed our destination from home to the hospital. We got back to Toronto, where I went to restock at base, but got a bit lost.
Hello, Diamond. How can we help you?
After getting all that sorted out, I made it to the hotel, grateful to have the opportunity to do such interesting work. This is probably a good time to talk about some of the best parts of this job, and of course that is primarily getting to travel for work and getting to see interesting places, usually in pretty short snippets, but also occasionally you actually get to stay at a pretty nice hotel. After a wonderful 8 hours of sleep, I am packed up, ready to go. Time to head back to Calgary. I made my way to the airport and enjoyed the best lounge coffee ever at the Air Canada Cafe before boarding my flight to Calgary. Glad to see mountains again, but already looking forward to my next adventure. Thanks for watching.